What's up, everybody? Welcome back to my channel. Today I'm going to be working on a commission, new airplane painting, and I'm going to be putting it on a wood panel. I have a couple panels here, and I'm going to seal both of them at the same time. Basically, this is the first step I do to keep any of the natural chemicals that are in the wood from leaking through later and ruining the painting, making it all funky. We don't want that. So this is not the same as gesso or primer. This is a layer that actually seals the wood, keeps all the chemicals locked in, closes off all the pores of the wood so that the wood isn't as absorbent. And the next step is going to be to apply some gesso, but you basically need to wait 24 hours before you can do that step. Y'all like my overalls, I know you do. I always wear these overalls when I'm doing gesso. It's super important to do that. So if you're not doing that, you're not doing it right. So this is the previous airplane painting I did, and the client saw this online and wanted something similar, but with a different airplane. We can get into that later. But the biggest challenge with this was trying to figure out how to recreate the background, because I had made the original background using an acrylic pour technique, which is pretty random. So the best thing I knew to do was just to take the same colors that I'd used before and pretty much just try to repeat the process, even though it was probably over a year ago when I first did those backgrounds, the original backgrounds. So here I'm just mixing up some paint with some Floetrol, using golden fluid acrylics, and I think you're supposed to do like a 50-50 mix at the most, but I just did it by eye, just trying to remember. It has been probably over a year when I did the first background. Anyways, I mixed up the colors that I used in the past and then put all those colors into one single cup. And again, I don't know how to do this technique very well. I've only done it a few times. I'm not sure there is a right or a wrong way, but at any rate, this is the method I used in the past. And it's surprising. I thought that I'd get wider bands of paint when I poured this out, but it ended up being pretty even. So you'll see in a second here, I also just dropped in a few drops of ultramarine blue at the end. And here comes the really fun part. Basically, you just stick the cup on the panel and flip it over and watch what happens. Pretty cool. I'm sure you guys have seen videos like this before. I didn't put any silicone or alcohol or anything in this, so it's just water, a little bit of water. So any cells that are created here are done just from the paint naturally mixing or not mixing together. And it turned out pretty awesome, I think, in the beginning especially. It's always interesting to see how it dries. It never stays, from what I could tell, it never really stays this way. It always flattens out and the paint mixes together a little bit more. So, but yeah, you can see there's not as much contrast as I thought. But anyways, I sent a picture of this to the client, and they were very happy with the direction at this point. So kind of just went with it. Now you're supposed to pop bubbles with some sort of a torch or whatever, but there weren't a lot of bubbles in this case because I wasn't using an additive, and so I just popped a few using a stick that I had, and then after 24 hours it looked pretty good. It was, like I said, it flattened out quite a bit, and but I was still feeling pretty good about it. Felt like I could work with it. Now the airplane I'm going to be painting on this panel is actually kind of a medium to dark gray, and actually a bluish gray, and so I felt like there was no way there would be enough contrast between the background of the panel and the airplane. So I decided, no guts no glory, right? I'm going to paint in some clouds, and here I'm just using a paper towel to put in some titanium white. And I was a little nervous getting started on this because I felt like the panel was pretty, it just didn't feel as much like a sky, and it again didn't have enough contrast. So I just went for it with a paper towel, and it's pretty cool. I think it turned out really well. Ended up using a little bit of a fan brush here just to provide some more texture to make it feel more like clouds from above, I guess. And I also end up using my finger in a little while, which I don't know why that seems to work really well, but it does. So again, I don't necessarily advise you paint with your fingers with acrylic paint, but what can I say? I do it all the time. Just don't lick your fingers afterward, I guess. Make sure you wash your hands. which is probably good advice these days, either way. So the client provided me with some really good reference material. Here's a spec sheet, I guess, or a blueprint. I'm not sure what you call these things, but it was the exact airplane that apparently he works with and flies all the time. So I cut one of these out, kind of scaled it down in the computer to size, and used it to figure out the placement. And this isn't that complicated. I don't know if there's a better layout or not. Again, I don't think there's a right or wrong way, but I just felt like it was a nice step to do to kind of get my scale, get my layout, see if there's a better orientation, especially with the clouds that I'd painted. And I kind of settled on this direction here. And once I had figured that out, I used Craola tracing paper to transfer the airplane exactly where I wanted it. You've probably seen this in other videos, probably seen it in some of my videos. Just an easy way to get your drawing or your artwork transferred onto the surface that you're going to be painting on. I've always considered myself to be pretty good at mixing color, but for whatever reason, this one felt a little difficult for me. It was a bit of a challenge trying to figure out what exactly was the right color. You know, I guess some of the photographs, they're all different hues and saturations and lighting situations, so it was difficult to nail down exactly what the true base color of the airplane is. At any rate, I used some Payne's gray and some various blues here to try and mix up a variety of shades and see if I could just match one to the photographs I had. And here's what that process looked like. What am I doing here? So I'm taking some Payne's gray, some titanium white, and some ultramarine blue, and some cobalt blue, and maybe even a third blue, and pretty much just playing around with mixing these colors together to see which one looks like it might be the best match. So I ended up going with cobalt blue, so Payne's gray, cobalt blue, titanium white, maybe just a tad of ultramarine blue. And then, yeah, it's time to just start painting. So this is the first layer, pretty much taking a small flat brush and just trying to get down pretty even coat of this darker shade of that mixture. And I was pretty happy actually from the start with the contrast that was there, and I think the clouds really did help to create some more separation visually from the background. And yeah, so from this point on, it's just going to be layers upon layers of paint and lots of details. So time lapse it, because you guys will be here for 15 years if I did it in real time. So the second layer is just a little bit of a lighter version of the paint mixture that we started with, and leaving a little bit of the edges peeking through, so you can almost get a little bit of a shadow effect starting to develop around the very edges of the plane. And pretty quickly going into a few lighter shades and then starting some detail work with the brush. Now this I'm just eyeballing, I'm just kind of going around with a small brush and just laying in some pretty obvious shadows. And again, I don't have a photograph that is directly above the airplane, so I'm having to kind of reconstruct it from the photos I do have and from the specs that I was given to just try to put these things in the right places. Yeah, so lots and lots of tiny adjustments. Now I'm ready to start putting in some of the line work, I guess the panel lines of the airplane. And again, there's a lot more detail in the photographs than there is on the blueprint that I'm working from. So I'm just trying to compare notes, as it were, and figure out which are the most obvious lines that I think make sense to start with. And in this case, I actually used the cutout that I had done and a small little tool here to create some very straight lines. And I debated whether or not I should just freehand this or not. I freehanded the last one, I believe. For whatever reason, I just felt like these lines needed to be, although they're not going to be perfectly straight, they needed to be fairly precise. And so I used this tool to just drop in some of those lines in a very small brush. And what I didn't show you guys is that I actually took all of my tiny brushes and did a whole bunch of tests trying to figure out which brush gave me the cleanest straightest, most precise lines. And I settled on a couple here that I'm using. And yeah, I think at this point I'm actually using some darker grays and lighter grays, so it's not just white lines for the panel lines. Some of the airplanes, I guess because of the light and the angle of the light, some of the panel lines appear to be white and some of them appear to be darker. So, I just kind of made it up as I went along here and played with both. So, painting all these details, it made me think of something I wanted to share with you all. Have you guys ever seen an artist or someone in your field maybe that is just so brilliant that something that it simultaneously makes you super inspired but also makes you want to quit and not even try to do whatever it is you're doing anymore? That kind of happened with me this weekend, and I came across this artist. Pretty much blew my mind, doing stuff with acrylic paint that I didn't think was even possible. And it reminded me of how in the past I've talked about I've always been more interested in abstract intuitive painting because I think naturally it's what I've been better at. I think that there's an element of chance and the act of discovery that happens and surprise that happens when you're painting that way, and I've always enjoyed it, and I don't think I'll ever master it, and kind of gone deep into that, right? At the same time, I've always had a healthy respect for people that can paint more realistic subject matter, but I've made this huge assumption. I've assumed that the type of artists that I've seen that I like that paint really well realistically, I just assumed that you had to work in oil to do that, and I was surprised to find this artist, Simkins, that paints an amazing detail using acrylic. So I guess the thing is I've always also kept sketchbooks and had a lot of ideas about these fantasy scenes and landscapes and fantastical subjects that I might want to try and paint one day, but just assumed that it was going to be too difficult for me to try to learn to paint that way because I'd have to pick up oils and get new equipment and do a lot more practice to just figure it all out. And I kind of thought, maybe one day. But when I saw this dude's work, it made me feel like that assumption has got me into a little bit of trouble because, I haven't really practiced some of the things that I think I would have liked to. And so I think over the next few months, definitely the next few weeks to months, I'm going to be pursuing more of this more realistic subject matter and just trying to see where it can take me. So yeah, sorry for the little tangent here, but at any rate, with this painting at the very end here, I'm basically adding in some more poofy clouds to try to make it look a little more realistic and make it feel a little bit more like this plane is at altitude. And yeah, let me know what you guys think about that whole subject matter. I think that if you do come across artists that inspire you but also depress you, that's okay. Take it in, let that happen. But I would say try to pivot and focus on, like I'm trying to do, just focus on the positives. Like figure out like where you can get better. What about that person's work is inspiring, and see if you can build some of those things into your daily or weekly practice. And yeah, let me know what you guys think about that whole thing, because I think it's happened to me before, and it certainly happened to me recently. One thing here is I forgot to paint the edges of this painting. I usually do this at the beginning. It's really much better to do it that way, because you can end up causing a big mess. And I could have taped it off, but I actually felt like it was going to pull some of the paint off if I did that. So and I just did a very careful job of it. And I also varnished it after this step, which I didn't show in the video. I also wanted to show you guys how I do the back of these panels. I'm not sure this is the best way, but this is the way I put wire on them. Here's a comparison between the previous painting and this painting. I think they both turned out pretty well. I'm very excited actually with how this one turned out. I hope the client really likes it. And thank you all for joining me. Let me know if this stuff is interesting to you all, and yeah, what you guys want to see next. Good luck with everything you're doing. Do something creative. Peace out. See y'all later.